Hello everyone, and welcome to my Young and the Restless official 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The shocking return of Noah Newman has left Genoa City reeling, leaving fans of the Young and the Restless questioning the very nature of reality. Noah, once presumed dead, suddenly appeared, seemingly out of nowhere, stirring a whirlwind of confusion, disbelief, and frantic urgency across the Newman family and beyond. At the heart of the chaos is Nick Newman, whose protective instincts are now fully activated as he grapples with a mix of disbelief and mounting fear for his family. Nick has always prided himself on his ability to control crises, but Noah's inexplicable return is testing every ounce of his patience and strategic thinking. Was this an elaborate hoax? A twisted dream conjured by his own psyche? Or, most alarmingly, some sinister plot by someone determined to destabilize the Newman empire? The questions were endless, but Nick knew one thing with absolute certainty: time was slipping away faster than he could track, and the answers were buried somewhere in the shadows of deception surrounding his family. Meanwhile, Detective Burrow's behavior had begun to shift in ways that Nick couldn't ignore. The seasoned detective, normally a figure of reliability and calm, now exhibited subtle but unmistakable signs of unease. His normally steady demeanor was punctuated by fleeting moments of distraction, hesitations in his speech, and a tension in his posture that suggested secrets buried deep beneath the surface. Nick had learned to read Burrow's cues over the years. He knew when the detective was holding something back, and the truth gnawed at him relentlessly. Something about Burrow's actions didn't add up, and with every passing moment, the evidence seemed to point toward a pattern of manipulation orchestrated behind the scenes, threatening to upend not just the Newman family, but anyone unfortunate enough to be caught in its wake. Nick's investigation had begun innocently enough, a few subtle questions to Burrow here, a careful observation there, but it soon became clear that the detective was not just withholding information, he was actively navigating a labyrinth of deceit. Burrow's interactions with Matt Clark, the enigmatic figure whose own motives were cloaked in ambiguity, had grown increasingly suspicious. Nick had discovered traces of Burrow's fingerprints in places he shouldn't have been, snippets of conversations overheard that hinted at a much larger scheme, and small inconsistencies in reports that, when pieced together, painted a picture of deliberate manipulation. Each revelation sent a chill down Nick's spine. The detective he thought he knew, the man he had trusted to protect the innocent and uphold the law, was now entangled in a web that might compromise everything Nick held dear. In the midst of the growing chaos, Matt Clark continued to play his games, exploiting every crack in the Newman family's defenses. The man had long been a wild card, a figure whose presence injected volatility into every room he entered, but now, with Noah's unexpected return, Matt seemed to thrive on the turmoil. His influence over Burrow, whether through subtle persuasion, coercion, or some unspoken leverage, was becoming increasingly apparent. Nick realized that the detective's strange behavior was not merely coincidental, it was a calculated response to Matt's manipulations. The implications were terrifying. If Matt was pulling Burrow's strings, then the information about Noah, and indeed the very circumstances of his resurrection, might be part of a larger, far more sinister plot than anyone could have anticipated. Every moment Nick hesitated, every time he doubted his own instincts, Matt gained another advantage, further tightening the noose around the Newman family. Nick's mind raced as he pieced together the fragments of the puzzle, but the emotional weight of Noah's return only made the task more urgent and more perilous. The line between reality and illusion blurred with each passing hour. When Noah appeared at the Newman ranch, the shock in everyone's eyes mirrored Nick's own internal turmoil. The reunion should have been joyous, yet the shadow of doubt hung over the room like a storm cloud, heavy with unspoken fears and whispered questions. Could they trust that this was truly Noah? Could they trust their own senses? And most critically, could they trust the people around them to navigate this minefield without inadvertently triggering disaster? Nick's instincts screamed that the answer was no, that beneath the surface of every smile, every reassuring word, lurked a hidden agenda that could unravel their lives in an instant. As Nick dug deeper, he began to uncover subtle, almost imperceptible patterns in Burrow's behavior, patterns that suggested meticulous planning and premeditation. Small mistakes, overlooked details, and moments of hesitation that most people would have ignored now became key pieces of evidence. It was as though Burrow was leaving a trail, intentionally or not, that would lead Nick closer to the truth. And the closer he got, the more dangerous the situation became. Nick realized that Burrow's strange actions were not isolated incidents, they were symptoms of a larger scheme orchestrated by a figure whose intelligence and cunning were matched only by their ruthlessness. Every interaction with Burrow became a psychological chess match, each conversation a calculated move in a game where the stakes were life and death. Matt's fingerprints were everywhere, figuratively if not literally. Nick began to see the scope of Matt's influence, understanding that his games were not merely about personal vendettas or petty revenge, they were about control. Matt had a vision for chaos, and he was willing to manipulate anyone, even a law enforcement officer like Burrow, to achieve it. This realization fueled Nick's determination to act swiftly, knowing that hesitation could prove catastrophic. Yet the complexity of the situation, combined with the emotional turmoil of seeing Noah alive, created a dangerous mix of urgency and vulnerability. Nick's resolve hardened. He knew that to protect his family, he had to confront Burrow, uncover Matt's machinations, and secure Noah's safety, all while navigating a minefield of deception that could explode at any moment. The stakes escalated further when Nick discovered hidden communications between Burrow and an unknown third party. Cryptic messages, encrypted files, and untraceable phone calls suggested that Matt's influence extended far beyond what anyone had imagined. The possibility that Matt had accomplices, individuals skilled in manipulation and deception, sent waves of anxiety through Nick. He had faced danger before, but this was unlike anything he had encountered, a calculated, multi-layered operation designed to destabilize him emotionally, mentally, and strategically. The lines between friend and foe, reality and illusion, were now blurred, and Nick realized that every decision he made could have profound consequences, not just for the Newman family, but for the fragile equilibrium of Genoa City itself. Nick's race against time became a high-stakes psychological battle, as he attempted to anticipate Matt's next moves and decipher Burrow's increasingly erratic behavior. He scrutinized every expression, every gesture, and every word for hidden meaning, aware that any misstep could tip the balance irrevocably. Meanwhile, Noah's presence added both urgency and distraction. Nick had to protect his brother while simultaneously unraveling a plot that threatened to engulf them all. The emotional stakes were monumental. Nick's love for his family, his commitment to justice, and his sense of duty collided in a maelstrom of fear, suspicion, and unrelenting determination. The situation reached a fever pitch when Nick confronted Burrow directly, challenging the detective's loyalty and probing for the truth. The tension in the room was palpable, a fragile thread of trust stretching taut under the weight of suspicion. Burrow's responses were measured, cautious, yet each word hinted at secrets that were not yet fully revealed. Nick's instincts told him that the truth was close, tantalizingly within reach, yet deliberately obscured by layers of deception. He understood that uncovering Matt's manipulations would require both strategic brilliance and emotional fortitude, balancing the rational pursuit of evidence with the need to safeguard his family's well-being. As the pieces of the puzzle began to coalesce, Nick realized the scope of Matt's machinations. Burrow, though ostensibly an ally, was ensnared in a web of influence, acting as both participant and pawn in a larger game designed to unsettle and control. Every strange action, every unexplained decision, suddenly made sense in context, revealing a pattern of manipulation and coercion that extended far beyond what anyone could have predicted. Nick's determination transformed into a relentless pursuit of justice, fueled by a combination of fear, anger, and an unwavering commitment to protect those he loved. Yet even as Nick pieced together the truth, the line between reality and illusion remained perilously thin. Noah's return, the uncanny timing of Burrow's strange actions, and the subtle but pervasive influence of Matt Clark created a scenario that seemed almost surreal. Nick questioned his own perceptions, his ability to trust his senses, and the reality of the events unfolding around him. Was Noah truly back, or was this a meticulously orchestrated deception designed to exploit every vulnerability in the Newman family? And if the reality of Noah's return was genuine, what other manipulations lay hidden beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered? The uncertainty was maddening, yet it only steeled Nick's resolve to confront the truth, no matter the cost. In the climactic moments, the tension reached its apex. Nick's investigation, coupled with his instinctive understanding of Burrow's behavioral cues, brought him closer to exposing the orchestrator of the chaos. The confrontation was inevitable. Matt Clark's influence over Burrow and the Newman family had reached a critical tipping point, and the only way to reclaim control was to face the mastermind directly. Nick's race against time intensified, every second a battle between strategy, courage, and emotional endurance. The Newman family's future, the integrity of the law, and the delicate balance of Genoa City's social order rested on the precipice of revelation. Ultimately, Nick's determination and insight set the stage for a dramatic showdown, one that would reveal the full extent of Matt's manipulation and Burrow's compromised position. Noah's sudden return, once a source of confusion and doubt, became a catalyst for action, compelling Nick to navigate a complex web of deceit, uncover hidden truths, and restore order to a city teetering on the edge of chaos. As the dust settled, the boundaries between reality and illusion blurred no longer. The truth was laid bare, exposing the cunning, the manipulation, and the resilience of those determined to survive in the face of extraordinary adversity. The Newman family, guided by Nick's relentless pursuit of justice, emerged stronger, more united, and ready to confront whatever challenges the future might hold, knowing that in Genoa City, even the dead could return, and even the most trusted allies could act in ways no one could anticipate. Even as the Newman family began to recover from the initial shock of Noah's unexpected resurrection, Nick found himself engulfed in an unrelenting storm of paranoia and urgency. Every creak in the floorboards, every hushed conversation, and every delayed phone response from Burrow became potential evidence of a conspiracy far deeper than he had initially imagined. The detective's strange behavior, once dismissed as stress or distraction, now took on a menacing edge. Nick knew that Burrow's erratic actions were not random but carefully calculated, and the possibility that Matt Clark had managed to manipulate him into complicity was no longer a theory, it was an increasingly frightening reality. Time, Nick realized, was no longer a luxury. Every minute that passed allowed Matt to tighten his grip, to escalate the chaos, and to put the Newman family further at risk. The sense of urgency was suffocating, a relentless pressure that demanded immediate action and unflinching vigilance. Nick's first instinct was to confront Burrow directly, but even that was fraught with danger. The detective was unpredictable, and Nick knew that any accusation made without irrefutable evidence could backfire disastrously. Instead, Nick began a subtle campaign of surveillance and strategic questioning, probing for inconsistencies in Burrow's statements and movements. He observed the detective with a hawk-like intensity, noting the slightest hesitation, the way his eyes flicked away from certain topics, the minuscule tension in his jaw when specific subjects were mentioned. It was in these tiny details that Nick sensed the underlying truth: Burrow was hiding something, and the nature of that secret had implications far beyond mere procedural misconduct. It was about control, manipulation, and the safety of his entire family. Meanwhile, Noah's reappearance continued to baffle and unsettle everyone around him. While the Newmans were overjoyed to see him alive, a quiet unease lingered. Noah himself seemed different, not physically, but in subtle ways that made those closest to him uneasy. His laughter sometimes felt forced, his recollections of past events occasionally inconsistent, and his reactions to familiar faces just slightly off-kilter. Nick couldn't ignore the nagging thought that Matt Clark might have orchestrated more than just Burrow's complicity. Was it possible that Noah's return was somehow linked to Matt's grand design, a part of a larger scheme that manipulated perception, sowed doubt, and destabilized the very core of the Newman family? Each time Nick tried to reach Noah with affection or casual conversation, he sensed a shadow behind his brother's eyes, a hesitation, a flicker of something unspoken. The tension between Nick and Burrow reached a boiling point one evening at the Newman ranch. Nick had pieced together enough circumstantial evidence to suspect that Burrow was not merely withholding information but was actively involved in facilitating Matt's manipulations. The detective arrived ostensibly to discuss a routine procedural matter regarding Matt, but Nick, sensing an opportunity, pressed him. "Burrow, we need to talk," Nick said, his voice calm but laced with steel. "I know something's going on, and I need you to be honest with me. Right now." Burrow's expression flickered between surprise and defensiveness. He opened his mouth as if to respond but then hesitated, his eyes darting to the side, calculating. That brief pause was enough for Nick to confirm what he feared. Burrow was ensnared in Matt's web, whether willingly or unwillingly, and the detective's next moves would be critical in determining the outcome of a very dangerous game. At the same time, Matt Clark's machinations continued to unfold with chilling precision. Nick had already noticed the detective's odd behavior, but what he didn't yet realize was the extent to which Matt had infiltrated other parts of the Newman family's world. Emails subtly altered, messages intercepted, and rumors spread under carefully constructed pretenses, all of it designed to keep Nick distracted, questioning his own judgment, and creating chaos at every turn. Matt's brilliance lay in his ability to operate in shadows, orchestrating events so that the Newmans could see fragments of the truth without ever grasping the full picture. Each revelation Nick uncovered only led to more questions, more uncertainty, and a growing sense of dread that Matt's reach might be virtually limitless. Nick's urgency escalated when he discovered that certain security logs at the Newman ranch had been tampered with. Surveillance cameras had gaps in their recordings, and timestamps seemed altered to obscure specific periods. At first, Nick had assumed a technical glitch, but the pattern was too consistent, too precise to be accidental. Someone had deliberately manipulated the evidence, and the implications were staggering. Matt's influence was not limited to manipulating individuals like Burrow, he was actively infiltrating the Newman family's defenses, creating blind spots and vulnerabilities that could be exploited at will. The realization sent a shiver down Nick's spine. Every precaution he had taken, every strategy he had devised to protect his family, was now compromised, and time was slipping away faster than he could act. The emotional stakes were compounded by Noah's own fragile state. While the Newmans rejoiced at his return, Noah struggled to reconcile the events that had led him to be presumed dead and the reality of being alive in a world that had moved on without him. He confided in Nick one night, his voice trembling, "I don't know if I'm really back, or if this is some twisted dream." Nick's heart ached at his brother's words, but they also provided critical insight. Noah's mind was a battlefield, manipulated perhaps not only by his own trauma but by external forces like Matt, who thrived on exploiting uncertainty and fear. It became clear to Nick that protecting Noah required more than just physical vigilance, it demanded emotional acuity, psychological insight, and an unyielding commitment to uncovering the truth before Matt could leverage Noah's vulnerabilities for his own gain. In parallel, the detective's conflicted loyalty became increasingly evident. Burrow oscillated between moments of transparency and careful deflection, revealing fragments of his knowledge while simultaneously withholding the full picture. Nick, ever the strategist, recognized this duality as both a danger and an opportunity. By maintaining careful observation and strategic questioning, he could potentially unravel Matt's plan piece by piece. Every hesitation, every vague response, was a clue, a breadcrumb that, when followed, could lead Nick to the mastermind behind the chaos that had engulfed his family. The detective's duplicity, while alarming, was not insurmountable. It was a puzzle, and Nick was determined to solve it, even as Matt's influence continued to loom like a shadow over every interaction. As Nick worked to uncover the truth, he began to uncover the depth of Matt's manipulative genius. Every scenario, every contingency, every interaction was meticulously calculated to destabilize, confuse, and control. Nick realized that Matt's endgame was not simply to manipulate Burrow or unsettle the Newman family, it was to create a world where perception became reality, where trust was eroded to nothing, and where every decision could be turned against those who had once believed themselves safe. The psychological toll was immense. Nick found himself questioning even his own instincts, every memory, every choice, every piece of evidence filtered through a lens of doubt. Yet even in the face of mounting uncertainty, he refused to falter. The Newman family's safety, the clarity of truth, and the reclamation of control from Matt's manipulative grasp depended on his relentless focus and unwavering determination. Matt's next moves, as Nick began to anticipate, were as audacious as they were calculated. The manipulations extended beyond mere interference with Burrow. They touched the lives of multiple Newman family members, subtly influencing relationships, sowing discord, and creating tension that threatened to erupt into chaos. Nick had always understood the destructive potential of manipulation, but the scale and precision of Matt's orchestration were unlike anything he had faced before. Each subtle move, each whispered suggestion, each carefully timed action was designed to keep Nick off balance, emotionally destabilized, and constantly questioning his own perception of reality. It was psychological warfare, and Nick was determined not to succumb, even as the pressure mounted and the stakes escalated to unprecedented heights. The turning point came one late night at the Newman Ranch, when Nick discovered evidence that Burrow had secretly met with Matt Clark. Hidden messages, anonymous tips, and discrepancies in Burrow's alibis painted a picture too detailed to ignore. Nick realized that he could no longer operate on conjecture alone, action was imperative. With Noah's safety hanging in the balance, he confronted Burrow once more, this time with a meticulous presentation of evidence, each piece designed to cut through the detective's evasions and compel honesty. The tension was palpable. Burrow's eyes betrayed a flicker of fear, of recognition that the web he had become entangled in was now unraveling, and that Nick was a force no manipulation could subvert. As the confrontation unfolded, the layers of Matt's manipulation became terrifyingly clear. Burrow, though still bound by fear or loyalty to Matt, could no longer maintain his carefully constructed facade. Nick's persistence, combined with his meticulous preparation, forced the detective to reveal critical elements of Matt's orchestration, plans to destabilize the Newman family, exploit Noah's return for leverage, and manipulate key players in ways that could have had catastrophic consequences. The revelations were staggering.